Hi, Pinchas here, and you have been watching my Anti-Judaism in Gospel of John series, and this is a live lecture that was done in front of an audience with interactive questions and answers, and so pick it up from the beginning if this is just where you're joining me. But essentially, in this segment, I'm going to ask a question about Anti-Judaism. Is the Gospel of John really anti-Jewish? Is it even possible? Who in the world reads the Gospel of John that way? And what has happened in history essentially because of this particular reading of the Gospel of John?
So is John's Gospel truly anti-Jewish? After reading this, you may think so. In fact, a lot of people in the Christian world think so, which is why they have the theology they do, okay? But you know, your gut tells you everything you know, every background, every teaching you ever heard, you realize, no, that cannot be. It simply cannot be. And you can think right now of a dozen reasons why, and that's why you keep raising your hand, because you want to kind of get those things out, because it's bothering you, right? I understand. It's okay. So, of course, John can't be anti-Jewish logically. It's just not possible. Why? Because the author himself is a Jew, and so is Jesus himself, and so are his disciples. So how can be anti-Judaism in John when all the people who are the actors, okay, there are no non-Jews in John at all, except Pilate, okay, and a couple of Romans. That's it. How can it be anti-Jewish? When all the actors, and the writer including, are Jews, living a Jewish life. You know, we're not talking about some guy, some outsider writing. This is a problem. This is a logical inconsistency that many people have forgotten, that the Gospels are Jewish, written by Jews, written for Jews, and Jews are the only actors in them, actually, except a few Romans can't there yet.
I thought you said Jews could be anti-Jewish.
Can be, although that was not the case in the first century, because guess what? If you could be anti-Jewish, then you basically are a pagan, because there's only two options for you. So you remember, there's no Christianity goes on there. There's Judaism or paganism. So if you're leaving Judaism, what are you joining? Paganism. That would be the only option there is. It's either this way or the way of the world, which is paganism. Worshipping false gods, things that are not gods, you know. And so most Jews did not go that way. Even the most liberal, most renegade Jews still did not want to cross that line when it came to it.
But there is an assumption among many Christians that essentially the instant the resurrection happened, that the Jewish followers of Jesus became what we think of as modern-day Christians. Sure. Like William Lane Craig, who I like a lot of his apologetics work, one of his arguments is, well, you know, look at the profoundly non-Jewish beliefs they turned out to have that had to have a cause and that kind of thing. It's
sure.
Like, you know, and he treats it as if, you know, it's a given that they all started worshiping on Sunday and
sure.
going to churches with steeples on top and eating pig and everything else instantly. And
right.
So there is that. People do assume that in fact they left Judaism.
Right.
For something.
Because the only Judaism they know is rabbinic Judaism, and it doesn't look like it. Why? Because rabbinic Judaism does not exist yet. Of course it doesn't look. What happens is you're inserting modern Judaism into the New Testament. You won't find it. You have to know Second Temple Judaism, and that's where really it lies. So yes, you're setting up false categories and saying it's not there. Okay. Now, what's the conclusion? That's the easy way of doing it. Frequent use of this term, the Jews, really creates a very unfortunate impression that Jesus' opposition are all Jewish people collectively, creates an impression as if Jesus and the disciples are not really Jews themselves, the outsiders, and that really what leads to this idea, Jews killed Jesus, okay? That's where this stuff comes from. It comes from the Gospel of John. Why am I saying anti-Judaism in John is a big problem? That's where it comes from. Every time people want to use this kind of rhetoric, I guarantee you they will quote the Gospel of John. They're not going to quote Paul, they're not going to quote Matthew or Luke, they're going to go straight to John. That's where we're going to get it. So, where do people get it? Well, there you go. When the Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat. And he said to the Jews, "Behold your king." So they cried out, away with him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Well, there you go. Who's getting blamed for this? Pilate says, "Should I do it?" And the Jew says, "Yeah, do it." See, this is how this is going to be twisted. This is how the story is going to be told. And that's why.
Pilate being strong.
Right, Pilate's
Pilate,
just,
he didn't want to do it.
he's just going along. He's just going along. They really are the ones urging him to do it. Crucify him, kill him. That's it. We don't have any kings but Caesar. So this is where this language of Jews kill Jesus really comes from, and it comes straight out of the Gospel of John. Anti-Jewish reading of the Gospel of John. Anti-Judaism in reading it that way. So if one imagines that Jesus came to start a new religion, because Judaism was oppressive, terrible, legalistic, dead faith, then John's terminology fuels this imagination. That's what happens. If this is how you think, then you are inevitably led down this path. If one reads the strong polemics in John's Gospel as Christian versus Jewish, okay, Jew versus non-Jew, this is how you're going to read it. Not, in reality, we know that there are no Christians in the Gospel of John. They're just Jews. So it's one Jew against another Jew, right? But if you're an outsider, you assume that there are actually Christians in the Gospel of John. So you think this is Christians arguing with the Jews. Because in your world, that's how it is. But not in John's world. Okay? So if you're going to have that, then anti-Judaism really is inevitable. It is a conclusion to which a person will arrive. Now, would anyone want to be on the side opposing Jesus? If you read the Gospels, do you want to be on the side? No. These people are terrible. They killed him. Look at what they did. You don't want to be on their side. So you see, this is an emotional moment of decision, and this is why people arrive in anti-Judaism. That's how they get there. It's a slippery slope, and it's actually an easy one to go down to. So in the Middle Ages, European Christians believed that Jews hated Christ so much that they would steal what's called the host, the communion wafers, the body of Christ, and they would secretly stab them with a knife to make them suffer and bleed like Jesus, as you could see in this 16th century painting. So you can see he's got a knife in his hand right there. He's got a little round wafer that he's actually stabbing with a knife. And the wafer is bleeding. Why? Because that wafer is Jesus. They're killing Jesus all over every time they get a hold of him. Now you think may not be serious, but my friends, this is real. And upon these imagery, theology is built. And guess what? These paintings are still with us. I think you can see this painting in the Louvre today. This is a real deal. This is what people thought Jews were doing. Once you paint a painting like this is what you think, this is what enters into people's mind. How could you not hate this? If this is something, a sacrilege to your faith, to your way of life, to the thing that is most precious to you and part of your faith, that's going to make anybody angry. And paintings like that, which, of course, Jews never did this. I mean, no Jew ever said, let me go find a communion wafer and stab it so it can bleed. I mean, come on, we understand this. This is a lie, okay? But it has been used, and it has been causes of pogroms and all sorts of things that happen, terrible things to Jewish people. Why? Because of this kind of stuff. So here's what happens. This is from Nuremberg Chronicle in 1493. This is an actual picture, an illustration. The Jews had been burned alive in Dusseldorf, Bavaria in the year 1338 for the crime of desecrating the host, mistreating the wafer, the communion wafer. They got a hold of it, they mistreated it, and that's the crime. So guess what? Burn alive. This is what we're talking about. This is what anti-Judaism leads to. This is the end of the train line, okay? This is the problem. And if you think the only people who are doing this who are worried about the hosts or Catholics or anything like that, unfortunately, that's not exactly how it ends. Because anti-Judaism is a theological paradigm, and it manifests itself as a disdain, not merely for Judaism as a religion, begins like that, but for the Jewish people in general. And once it goes down that road, it's impossible to stop it. It becomes sanctioned by the church, it becomes theologically justifiable. I can find it in the Bible, it's right there, Jesus said it, I believe it. So here's the problem. We have Martin Luther, okay, who's a great reformer who comes out to change everything that people are doing wrong. He reads the Bible, and all of a sudden, he comes up with stuff like this. This is Martin Luther's anti-Jewish pamphlet from Wittenberg, Germany, right around the year 1596, okay? And in this pamphlet, what you could see is a picture of Jews drinking milk from a pig and eating excrement. This is what this is depicting right there. That's why he's lifting the tail of a sow. Right up on the top, I have no idea what the pamphlet says. I can't read it. it's written in cursive German, but this one I can read. That says, Rabbini Shem HaMeforash. You know what that means? Rabbis, Shem HaMeforash, the ineffable name, the unspeakable name. This is some kind of a pamphlet that has to do with God's name that cannot be pronounced, the Yod He Vav He. So Luther had a problem with it. He had a problem with the rabbis, said don't pronounce God's name. So he wrote a little pamphlet and decided to slap a picture of Jews suckling on a pig. How that has anything to do with God's ineffable name, I don't know. But in his mind, somehow, that piece of advertising really worked.
There was a petition 2 years ago to get that removed. I don't know if, I think it was done, though.
Yeah, there's actually a stone carving of what we call Judensau in a corner of this particular cathedral in Wittenberg, which Luther preached. It's still there. It's a piece of a stonework on the side of the building. Yeah. People have petitioned to remove it, but they said it's history. It's ugly. We don't like it. I say keep it there because it reminds people where they were, and if you take it away, then we can deny that past. But the fact is, now, past may be ugly, but we got to remember it because it helps us to understand where we should be. Okay, it's okay to see ugly things in yourself. It's okay. Just like David was saying in the Drosh. Sometimes you're staring, you look at the mirror. Sometimes we need to look at the mirror. So yeah, this is ugly. If I talk to Christians about this, most people are very not comfortable with this. You understand? But this is what anti-Judaism leads to. It leads to flat out anti-Semitism. It's disdain now for Jewish people, not just for Jewish way of life, not just for Jewish worship, not just for Jewish interpretation of the scriptures.
So hopefully you're still with me. Hopefully you're still following. You're watching. If you're a Christian and you're watching this seminar, you probably are being rubbed in the wrong way. I'm sorry. This is a difficult topic, really unpleasant to talk about, but it is reality. It is past. There's nothing I can do about it. I can pretend it didn't happen, and I wish it didn't happen, but it did. So it's a tough one. Hang in with me, because in this particular section, I address the problem of John's language and his terminology, this whole idea of the Jews. I actually go into the illustration of John's prologue, and I show you how to read John in a very anti-Judaic way. And then I go into the Greek, I go into the grammar and show you how once you look at John for real, there is no anti-Judaism there. Not really. So is John really anti-Jewish? I don't think so, if you haven't figured this out yet. So if you're interested, keep watching. And if you appreciate this content, please hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell. And that way we can stay in touch and I can update you on new videos that I put out like this.
So when you read the Gospel of John, you run across these verses and you say, wow, I don't know how to explain it. So here's a good one. Most everybody has read this. This is the very beginning of John. He came to his own did not receive him. You read that, right? You're familiar with that. So how does this verse usually get interpreted? He came to his own, and those who were his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God. This is John 1, verses 11 through 12. And this is NASB, New American Standard Bible. Very literal translation, very wooden, kind of straight. It tries to be very precise and translate things exactly what they say. So what is the typical translation? Well, the typical way of how people explain this verse is this. Something like this. Jesus revealed himself to Israel, and the Jews did not receive him. But those who received him, meaning non-Jews, he gave them the right to become children of God, to become his new chosen people. That is how a person who embraces anti-Judaism would read that verse. And I will propose to the majority of the Christians read that verse in exactly that way. I would propose to the majority of the Christians. I want to have fun, do a test. Stop a Christian, have him read that verse, say, what does that mean? I guarantee you they will give you an interpretation, something along these lines. Maybe not in those words, but when you actually start asking questions, it will come out that that's how it would be. Jesus came to Jews, Jews rejected him, non-Jews didn't reject him, so they became the children of God. That's it. Done. That is in the very beginning of John's Gospel. This is first chapter. These are the beginning verses. So that sets me up of reading the rest of it in the light of that. Because if you start reading a book, and I tell you, in the very beginning of the book, that this and this and this is the conclusion I want you to have, then for the rest of the book, you look at what? how I came to that conclusion or why I have that conclusion and so on and so forth, because I already gave away the conclusion. There you go. I already gave you away what this book is all about. Jesus came to his own. His own did not receive it. The rest is a story of how it happened. Can you see how now the rest of the Gospel of John will be read in an anti-Judaic way? Very easy. Very easy. It's a setup.
How about John 4?
John 4.
Samaritan woman.
Okay. She's Samaritan. She receives him.
I know.
You know, and
Right.
you know that's it. So
Salvation's of the
What?
Jews.
So, well, see, that's just the conundrum. This is the problem that people have with John. John has positive statements about Jews. Among all of this, and by the way, this is not a negative statement. This is actually a positive statement, but most people don't realize it. But among all of the things that could be misconstrued, you certainly can't misconstrue salvation of the Jews, right? Woman, you don't know what you're talking about. Salvation is from the Jews. What? This is the most positive Jewish statement in the entire gospel. Salvation is of the Jews. In fact, without Jews, there's no salvation, which is why I'm glad you're talking to me, because I'm a Jew. You know, that's essentially what he says to the Samaritan woman, if you think about it. It's a very powerful statement. Most of the time overlooked. From the Jews historically, from the Jews chronologically, but now it's really, we got it. So we don't need it anymore. You know, that's done. That's historical. So how can you read this? You know, you could say, he's taking this out of context. Let's look a little bit bigger picture. This is John 1:11. He came to what was his own. His own did not accept him. This is New Revised Standard Version. But all who received him and believed in his name, he gave them power to become children of God, who were not born of not blood and the will of flesh or the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified of him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was before me. From his fullness we have received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ." So there you go. This is the context. Does that help us in any way to extrapolate that Jews did not reject Jesus? No, the English doesn't help, in fact, at all. I will tell you that English will not help. So I'm going to show you a little bit of Greek. This is something, okay, you got to understand. I always get into Greek. Why? Because the New Testament is in Greek. That's the original language it's in. And that's where all the good stuff is buried. Now, this is Jewish Greek. You know why? Because a Jew wrote it. Okay? So this is it. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. This is what NRSV would say. His own people did not accept him. So look at this sentence. You know, kai hordoi auton uperlabon. To his own, this is a literal translation. This is me translating exactly what it says. To his own he came, and his own did not take or did not accept him. Straightforward, word for word. I can't translate it any other way except that's what it says. Now here is where you cannot see what's happening in Greek that is not visible in English. The first, you have two phrases right here. The one in blue and the one in red. It means his own, okay? The second his own, hoidoi, is plural masculine. Now that was important. All the words in Greek have genders, and genders mean things. They're important. So the second his own is plural masculine. So he's coming to someone, to some people, right? Somebody. Masculine, plural. Many things. Okay? Many people, presumably. The first his own, taida, is plural neuter. Neuter. Now you understand, now we're talking about it. We're not talking about him or her or them. We're not talking about people anymore. All of a sudden we're talking about neuter. You don't address people in neuter, right? If this phrase, hoidoi, his own, are people, okay? If they're Jews, if the second one who rejected him, then why did he come to something and not someone? Because you have plural neuter, okay? He comes to something that is plural neuter, which is called his own. But what rejects him is somebody who is plural masculine. This is very important, because if you can't understand to whom he came, you can't understand who rejected him.
You're saying one is a subset of the other.
That's right. They're dependent. You can't see it in English because the genders don't show up. His own is his own in English, right? It makes no difference whatsoever. But when you look at Greek, you say, wait a minute, why is this his own neuter and why is that his own is masculine? In the same verse, right next to each other. That doesn't make sense. How does that correlate? So we have a problem. So this is what I call follow the neuter game. You ready for a little game? Here's this called follow the neuter. I begin in the beginning of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things, this phrase right here, all things, okay, in Greek it's panta, all things, is plural neuter. Okay, all things that came into being through him, and without him, not one thing, okay, not one thing is udein, which is a singular neuter. Again, why? Because we're talking about things. Things are being created, not people per se at this moment. What has come into being, and that phrase right here, hogigonen, is again singular neuter. Then it says, in him was life, and life was light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Well, by the way, the word light is also singular neuter. So far, we're following the neuter, right? So we've seen a lot of neuters. Now, the word is masculine, okay? Logos is masculine, but we're following neuter. We're trying to figure out who is the neuter in that passage, right? Because we have to find a reference point. So the true light, remember, phos is neuter, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. Now the word world, cosmos, is masculine singular. So now we have neuter, 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 enters masculine singular, all of a sudden into the passage. And it's paralleled with something else. So he came to what his own, here's our verse of the problem, there's neuter, and his own people did not accept it. So his own people, this is how NRSV translated it. I would say the word people is not there, okay? Word people was supplied in English. So some Bibles will supply the word people because they want you to realize that people rejected him. Other Bibles will not supply the word people, like NSB, and they'll just keep it plain and just let you assume who it is that's rejecting him. So what I want you to see, there's a little bit of a gender switch that's going on here. And my question is, I want to know to whom he came, that is neuter. Okay? So from all the passages that we read so far, what do you think all these references are to that is in neuter?
The world, the creation.
The creation. All things, right? Not one thing that came to be, came into being without him. What came into being? Those are all inanimate objects. Then you have light, okay? Also neuter, that comes into play. And all of a sudden, it talks about true light. And it says true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. What I want you to see is the poetic parallelism. Who was in the world? The light, right? Or the Word. The Word became flesh, right? The Word was in the world comes through him, yet the world does not what? It does not know him. But then you could go in parallel. He came to his own. He repeats himself. He came to his creation, but who rejected him? His own. His own creation. The world rejected him. All those things that he created, say no. I want you to see that this verse 10, okay, verse 9 and 10 and 11 are all piece of one poetic parallelism. He comes into the world, which he makes, and the world rejects him. Then verse 11, everything that he came that is his own, he's a part of it, okay? He is the true light. Light is the first thing created. Yet, even though he is a part of the world, and this creation came through him, through the Word, right? God speaks the Word, things come into being. That's the idea. He's gone. Now he says, no, rejecting him. So who's rejecting him? What I'm trying to tell you is that in translation, you can really inject the word people over there and make it work. The Jews rejected him. Jesus came to Jews. Jews didn't like him. They rejected him. Now, reading this in context, you could clearly see that we're talking about creation. The Word coming to creation, which came through that Word, and the very creation, the cosmos, is saying, no, I'll have no part with that. So who rejected Jesus? The whole world, cosmos, rejected him. See, that's John's way of explaining it. So if you read John's prologue carefully, you recognize that this is very connected to Genesis 1. In fact, it's kind of a little bit of a parody of Genesis 1. All the references to his own really are parallel. It's kind of like a little midrash on Genesis 1. That's what it is. And look at the continuation. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave the power to become children of God. I want you to see non-Jews in here, okay? See if you can find them. Who were born not of blood, of the will of flesh, or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory. What I'm interested in is who is us and we, of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, this was he of whom it was said, he who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was before me. From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. What I want you to see is how those verses continue. Now that we could see the context, that Jesus comes to the creation, and the creation, the cosmos, rejects him. But does all creation reject him? No. There were some who accepted. So to those who did receive him, there's some in there, he gives them the ability, the power, the capacity to be children of God. And this is not a natural thing, this is a supernatural thing. This is not born of the flesh and blood. And it's kind of like, that's that. We have lots of miraculous births in the Jewish Bible, starting with Isaac and on. So this is it. This is not another miraculous birth. And then the Word becomes flesh, and he dwells among us. Who is us in this verse? If John is writing, who do you think John is writing and says us? Who is the Word dwells among? If you're John, who is us? John and your buddies, right? Whoever us is, us sitting in the room right now is us here, right? So if the Word came, dwelled among us, and we were what? Witnesses. We've seen his glory. Who saw his glory? Were any Christians out there back then? No. No Christians followed Jewish itinerant preacher through the hills of Galilee. Okay? They didn't care. It was all in Hebrew anyway. At least I think so. Some people think it was in Greek. I think it was all in Hebrew. So he says, he came, lived among us. We've seen his glory. We are the witnesses. We were there. Okay? Then one of us, John, one of us, testified of him. See, I told you, he's the guy, right? And it says, from his fullness we have received. We's who? Again, the same people in the room with John, presumably, right? We have received. Because why we have received? Because we were there. Because we were the original witnesses. We saw his glory. We received it. Not we living 500 years from now. No, we live 500 years from now and have not received anything except second, third, 15th hand information. We've seen his glory. And we've received grace upon grace. Grace upon grace. Yeah. That's a great phrase. The law, one grace, and then comes grace and truth through Jesus Christ. Second grace. You're not going to get this interpretation in church now, by the way. But anyway, you get the idea. So, for those who read John's Gospel in light of Christianity versus Judaism, the paradigm the English translations may create is us versus them. That's what it's going to be like, okay? Which is not really there. Why? Because there's us and no them. There is only us in the Gospel of John. There are no them. There is no Christianity. There is no Christianity that's severed from the Jewish people in the first century of Common Era. It cannot exist. It's not real. Okay? It's a figment of imagination of people like Craig. Okay? It's not yet possible. So who are the Jews? The hoi Judaioi, okay? In this gospel. There are actually several possibilities that I'd like to talk to you about, but not this time, not in this session.